What's up guys, I'm Phoenix Master 1 and welcome to my refined review and builds guide for the new refines this month. Aversa gets a more combat oriented weapon refine which can help fix her damage output. Unfortunately, she does not double down on her supportive niche and she doesn't gain any kind of extra supportive effects like many people have wanted, but nonetheless she can hit much harder with this refine. So she can inflict -4 debuff to all stats of the opponent, as well as panic if the opponents have 3 less HP than Aversa and if they're adjacent to each other. Now she can also improve her own combat by inflicting -4 attack speed and resistance debuff on the opponent during the combat, and finally she gets a PLEGIAN effect. So we have seen PLEGIAN effect many times. We have seen this on Male Morgan, we have seen this on Vulture Tomes, on PLEGIAN weapons. It's basically a debuff doubler and it has got amazing synergy with the debuffs that she can provide with her primary condition. And keep in mind that the -4 debuffs do actually stack up with the panic debuffs as well. So she can get a lot of in-combat debuffs by utilizing this PLEGIAN effect from her refine and hit much harder and just have an overall better combat. Now this refine is definitely going to be quite divisive among the players because a lot of players invested into Aversa for the supportive niche, and unfortunately this weapon refine doesn't really build onto that. It doesn't even make her HP condition of this weapon lenient like it does with a lot of the other weapon refines. On the other hand, if you were using her in Arena, then her damage output was really lackluster before, which now gets fixed and she can definitely function a lot better in the combat and actually get the kills, and can even outspeed a lot more opponents and even bait out some of the opponents because of the PLEGIAN effect. Now if you want to build her up, then on a budget you don't really have too many options that can go with the offensive route and double down on her PLEGIAN effect. The rain skill and the trace skill are expensive stuff, so you can just run a link skill and a tactic skill to support your allies. And Arena is easily one of the better game modes of Aversa because rally skills and visible buffs are extremely common there. So the panic from Aversa's Knight is going to be giving you a lot of mileage. Now in Arena, R-Dual Flying 4 is going to be helpful in increasing your scoring as well as the HP, so it does have good synergy with her HP condition. You will have to run a Sacred Seal that can give you more HP so that you can debuff and panic a lot more opponents. And in Arena, people are going to be having their units blessed along with legendary units, so they can actually get the extra HP. So every point in HP does matter in Arena, so running this kind of Sacred Seal is extremely important. But unfortunately, these HP Sacred Seals are low scoring, so if you want to compensate for the low scoring, then you have to run a 300 SP Slotsy skill so that she can hit the max scoring while also running an HP Sacred Seal. So this is going to be necessary, and you can just run something like Joint Drive Attack or Joint Drive Speed. It doesn't really matter, it has to be a 300 SP Slotsy skill. Range flyers unfortunately don't have a lot of options, so that's why a Fortress skill is the best option for Aversa, and this could be obtained from the Divine Code section. If you want to invest even more into her for Arena purpose, then having the HP boon can definitely help you, because like I said, every single point in HP does matter, and that's why Summoner support is also going to be really helpful. If you're going to be using a Floret on her, then I feel like the speed asset is going to be helpful in Arena because Arena does have a lot of really speedy units which are new, so having the extra speed can help you double them and pretty much reduce the effectiveness of a lot of the speed-based damage reduction skills that she can face in combat. Like I said, you have to run a 300 SP Slotsy skill, so speed resistance hold is an extremely expensive option, but it's a rain skill and it's always going to be active and can also support your allies, so it's pretty much the best premium option for her Slotsy. And you can run Blue Flame because Ruptured Sky is not going to be giving you that much damage if you're going to be debuffing the opponent's attack by a lot with her Aversa's Knight. And Aether does have a lot higher cooldown, so that's why Blue Flame pretty much hits that sweet spot where you can definitely utilize it. She can also be used in Aether Raid's offense, but in the modern times, people are going to be using save tanks. By running attack speed rain and having her on the front line, your save armors are going to be able to make use of the in-combat debuffs from her rain skill. And if you're running something like Ascended Fiorm, then she does appreciate the extra speed, and you can just run a link skill in her slot B to support more. And if you're not able to run the rain skill, then something like Defense Tactic also does work out in her slot C, but of course, it's not going to be as good as a rain skill for a save team. And Distant Guard can also help your save tanks. Aversa can be pretty nice in the light season, especially if you can run Milla, because then you can isolate the dancers like Triandra and make it so that they cannot get rid of the panic and the debuffs on their allies after dancing. In this season, we also have Note as the opponent all the time, so ruining her bonus doubler is really nice with the panic effect. And a lot of teams do run visible buffs, so she can definitely help you a lot. And if you want to fully make use of the offensive capabilities of this weapon refine, then you can just run attack speed catch 4, have speed resistance fortress and the rain skill, and just go all out offensive. Still running an HP Sacred Seal is going to be helpful with her weapon, and again the speed asset can definitely help with this kind of offensive build. Aversa is a top tier mage in Pawns of Loki because of her support and also her high HP, but their fortress skill is really not going to be doing much, so you can run Axe Breaker so that you can deal with the Axe opponents much easily, and her slot C is kind of flexible with this kind of build. Spring Veronica actually becomes a very strong nuke with this weapon refine and can also provide support to her allies. So Vidofnir's Egg provides her with +9 attack and speed during the combat and also +4 defense and resistance. And the main effect of this weapon, which makes her a really strong nuke, is the fact that she's got Ashera's Blade Tome, or I guess Ally Blade Tome. It basically works similarly to how Ashera's weapon functions, where it will give you more attack based on the highest buffed ally within 2 spaces of you. So if an ally is fully buffed with +6 to all of their stats, then she can get +24 attack during the combat, and it's pretty much like a proxy Blade Tome in that sense, where she's not going to be susceptible to the lull skills, panic skills, and can simply use the buffs of the ally to get the extra attack during the combat. And the final effect is a support effect which can provide the Orders buff as well as +6 attack and speed buff to herself and the allies within 2 spaces of her. So this kind of Orders buff has been seen before on Brattle Katria. Obviously Veronica does not give the triangle attack, but still the Orders buff can be amazing for increasing the mobility of your team and also giving teleportation to Veronica herself. And because she can buff the allies for +6 attack and speed, she can essentially get +12 attack during the combat because of her Blade Tome effect. So you just need to run someone with defense tactic, resistance tactic, and buff up your allies. And she definitely has good synergy with units like Legendary Tiki or Legendary Hector, who also provide the defense and resistance buff to themselves and also the allies, so you can fully buff your entire team with the combination of Veronica and those units. So Veronica can hit extremely hard with this weapon refine and also fit into a lot of teams to provide her support with the Orders buff, which a lot of teams do appreciate, and she can also be useful in Aether Raid's defense because of the Orders buff. Of course, she is no Brattle Katria, but still, she is a unique green mage flyer who can hit extremely hard and also provide the support to her allies. You can also build her up on a budget by just running a defense tactic and slot C. You can also run 4 to 5 flyers actually if you're running her on an all flyer team. And unfortunately, the budget options are not the best for her slot A. She does not want to run Fury because the HP condition of her weapon refine does require her to be above 25% HP. So that's why Life and Death can work. It does make her a lot more frail, but at least it's not going to be giving her the chip damage. And you can just run Desperation on her as she's pretty much going to be a glass cannon. But if you want to invest a bit more into her, then running the Fortress skill is going to be helpful. Now keep in mind that when she's going to be teleporting with her weapon refine, she's not going to be able to get the Canto out of the Fortress skill. It's mainly there to provide her with the debuffs because ranged flyers have like negative options that they can run. So this is pretty much the best option that she has got, and a rain skill is going to be fantastic and a consistent option that she can utilize to improve her offenses. And in the slot you can run Swiss Sparrow or attack speed catch, and Blade Session is simply going to be giving you more firepower. Because Veronica can hit extremely hard, she's going to be able to get a lot more damage output from Glimmer than she does from Moonbow, so that's the special that you can definitely run. Attack speed catch can provide you with higher throughput, and you can just run her with plus speed IV or plus attack. I kind of prefer plus attack for nuking really hard, but plus speed is definitely functional as well with this kind of offensive weapon refine. And then if you want to invest heavily into her, then you can fodder off your Spring Sonia to Veronica so that she can get the Unity skill as well as the New Hold skill. Attack speed Unity has got amazing synergy with her weapon because as it is, she wants to be within 2 spaces of her allies, so with the Unity skill she can increase her firepower even when she gets debuffed. Spring Veronica can also be run in Aether Raid's defense, and you can actually run her along with Brattle Katria I guess in the Anima season, so that Elamine has to choose one or the other to disable the Orders buff from. Obviously they're going to be choosing to disable Brattle Katria, but I guess Veronica can still provide the Ylgr's buff, but still it is going to be 2 green units, so it really depends on your team composition. You can also use her in the dark season. It really depends where you want to get the Ylgr's buff from, but in the anima season, if you're just going to be using her without Brattle Catria, then she's going to be getting disabled by Elimine. So in the dark season, there's no false start, so she can provide the Ylgr's buff. In the light season, we do have Note, who has got the bonus doubler, and even without triggering her menace skill, she can get these buffs and be a lot more bulky. You can just run any kind of dancer or ally with defense and resistance tactic, and you can just get the Omni buffs on your entire team with the help of Veronica, and also get the Ylgr's buff. And this can also help you not run aerobatics on your dancers like Triandra or Dancer Eldigan, and they can just teleport out of the Ylgr's buff. Finally, if you do plus and merge her, then she's going to be absolutely amazing in Arena because of her support. And Rally Defense Res Plus is pretty much going to be the best rally skill because as it is, she can buff up the attack and resistance. And then you can just run the standard fodder tray skill with a rain skill or a hold skill if you have that fodder available. Yeah, there's just not too many options for the range flyers, and this is pretty much it for the offensive options. Ylgr gets a very solid weapon refine, which makes her much better offensively and also gives her a supportive role. So with this weapon refine, she can get +9 attack and speed during the combat. She also gets 15% true damage based on her speed per hit, and then finally she can have a 3-space rain debuff on the opponent. And the value of this in-combat debuff is going to be based on the visible buffs of Ylgr herself or the debuffs of the opponent, and every single stat is calculated independently. So just to give you an example, if Ylgr has got +6 attack buff, then she can debuff the opponent's attack by -6 during the combat. Similarly, if the opponent has got -7 defense debuff, then because of Ylgr's effect, they can also get -7 defense debuff in the combat as well. So it could be considered like a PLEGIAN rain effect, but not really because it can also work on her buffs. So it's actually quite flexible depending on how you want to get the in-combat debuffs on the opponent, either by buffing up Ylgr or by debuffing the enemy. Now this could also be called the hold effect because it is a 3-range rain skill, but still I just stuck with the rain wording because a lot more people are familiar with that. So this kind of 3-space rain debuff is going to be helpful to a lot of the save armor units who can basically be on the back line, and then Ylgr could be on the front line providing them those debuffs, and they can just protect her from the range and melee opponents. And she definitely fits into the meta in terms of the save tanking, and you're definitely going to be seeing her a lot being used in Aether Raid's offense and in different game modes. So she ends up being a really nice support unit and has much better combat now. Ylgr didn't really have the highest base attack, so that's why getting the true damage and also getting this rain debuff can be really good. You want to run her with the allies who can buff her up, Hellbendy being an example and a canonical friend, and it's not really all that hard to run tactic skills or buff up Ylgr with some other way, and you can also run her with allies who can debuff the opponent like her Niffled siblings. So both buffing and debuffing allies are good teammates with her so that she can activate her 3-space rain effect, which not only helps her in the combat but can also help other allies take advantage of those in-combat debuffs on the opponents. If you want to build up Ylgr on a budget, then you can simply run speed defense link in her slot base so that she can get the speed and defense debuff, which she can definitely make use of. And in the slots you can just run attack smoke as a budget option. I guess the oath skills are also an option, but I'm not the biggest fan of them because it's not really all that hard to buff up an ally by running a dancer with double tactics, but I guess it depends a lot more on your team composition. Attack speed ideal is a pretty nice slotty option even at its tier 3 version from Miriel because it does work pretty nicely with the visible buffs that she wants to get, and it also provides her with extra offenses. And then Blade Session is going to be necessary for just maxing our offenses even at +1 merge. Plus speed IV is pretty nice on Ylgr because she can get the true damage out of it. If you want to invest a bit more into her, then she can definitely run attack speed Unity or attack speed ideal in her slot A. Both are pretty good options, and I would say that Null Follow Up is pretty much going to be her best slot B option because she's really fast and she wants to get the true damage out of her weapon even on the second hit. And if you buff her up for her attack, then she can also get the attack debuff on the opponent and not be all that frail. And because of her supportive weapon refine, she's usually going to be near her allies, so the attack speed unity effect is pretty easy to trigger, and you can easily get that from Brave Marianne. And then Time Pulse could be a good option if you at some point want to run Lethality, as it will have good synergy with that. And that takes us to our third build. So here we have got Lethality and Time Pulse, which brings it down to 3 cooldown. And then you can simply run Flashing Blade so that you can trigger it in a single round of combat if the opponent counterattacks. Ideal skill does work out nicely with the visible debuffs that she's going to be having. And like I said before, she's an amazing support for a save ball, especially in Aether offense. So she fits right into the meta in terms of tanking and for supporting. There are also some other support units who can be run with the save ball, like Kinshi Hinoka, but Astra Season already has 2 colorless units in Elamine and Ashera. So Ylgr can definitely help you many times for the cleanup by being a blue dagger unit, and also by being a different color from all of those mythics, and also from Regin and Plumeria. Life and Death can be run if you want to soak Bright Shrines with Ylgr and also soak up the Chill Speed and stuff like that. A Link skill is going to be helpful, especially with Ashera, and I do like her in the Astra Season because Ashera is going to be there and she can give you visible buff of +6 attack and resistance with her Slotsy skill. So Ylgr can get the remaining buffs from this Link skill and also support her allies with the Distant Guard, especially your far safe tank, who's going to be getting pressured by a lot of range units. A Ruse skill is also an option because her weapon can work on the debuffs of the opponent as well and then double down on it with the rain effect. So that's why the Ruse skill from the Divine Code section can be helpful, and sometimes the guard effect can be a lifesaver, especially when the Aether opponents are going to be running 2 cooldown specials and such, so your tanks can pretty much avoid getting hit by those specials. So Ruse skill is definitely quite useful. And then finally, if you have Disarm Trap available, then you can definitely run that. And at certain point after some investment, she's going to be having more than 55 HP, so she's not going to be affected by the Hex Trap as of making this video. So Disarm Trap can definitely be helpful for just not caring about the bolt traps that are going to be on the front lines so that your tanks don't really take the damage. And then going all out with double life and death can allow you to soak Bright Shrines almost always for your safe tanks. And that is extremely good, especially if they're not running something like Slick Fighter or they do not have some kind of debuff neutralization. Because of her 3 range debuff, she doesn't always have to be on the front line in front of your save ball. It can also be a Plumeria who can provide the attack res rain debuff, or even some other, support unit like Elamine, and you can easily run Sabotage Attack on your Elamine or Ashera because of their resistance and pretty much have good synergy with Ylgr's Weapon Refine. So there's a lot of options that you can do for supporting your save balls in Aether raids. And then finally, at max investment, she could be used in Arena with B-Dual Infantry 4, and a Ruse skill could be run here, but Null Follow-Up definitely helps you a lot against a lot of the follow-up negation tanks. So I definitely like Null Follow-Up a bit more on this kind of Ylgr, who's going to be facing combat a lot more than the Aether raid support build. And Lethality with Flashing Blade is going to be helping you as a high scoring special and also for high damage output. Tibarn gets a Weapon Refine that doesn't really change too much, but just makes him a bit better at what he did before. So with this Weapon Refine, he can get +10 attack and defense during the combat, and now the auto follow-up condition is a lot more lenient. He still has the same Beast transformation, which can give him 1 extra movement, and finally he can get special charges on both his attacks and foes' attacks. So this can free him up from running Heavy Blade Sacred Seal, and it pretty much makes him into like a flying Legendary Ephraim. He doesn't have the Null Guard or the Canto, but still, this is pretty much like a Flame Segment Weapon Refine, and he can just use the high cooldown specials like Gale Force and Ignis. Despite this Weapon Refine just helping him with his role, there are still other units who can run Gale Force builds much better because they've got the -1 special cooldown, so they have a 4-turn Gale Force, or they have Null Guard or some other things going on for them. So Tibarn can be a bit better with this Weapon Refine and more consistent at what he does. He's still going to be facing competition for that role. So if you want to build him up even on a budget, then you can run Hit and Run as a slot B skill. This is pretty much our bootleg Canto, so that could still be helpful, and he can just run Gale Force. And he doesn't really need to run Dive Bomb in my opinion, because he can get so much defense out of his Weapon Refine that Dive Bomb can actually mess up the Gale Force triggers unless you're running Quicken Pulse. So that's why you can just run Near Trace, and Near Trace is pretty much going to be his best slot B skill because Beast units don't really have access to Flow Guard or Flow Refresh or anything of that nature, and trade skills are pretty much their option. Attack Defense Rain is also helpful for the consistent debuffs, and then you can just run Attack Defense solo. Now if you don't want to run Gale Force, then you can also run Ignis, and a game mode where Gale Force is not really run is going to be Summoner Duels. So you can run him with Ignis there, and his flying mobility with his 1 extra movement can definitely be helpful there. He's easily one of the better users of Sturdy Surge so that he can heal up when he triggers his special. And because of the high cooldown of Ignis, he can actually heal up a lot of HP out of Sturdy Surge, keeping him healthy at all times. And Ignis is going to be a 4-turn special which you can trigger if the opponent counterattacks. If you want to use him in Aether offense, then you can just run the hit and run build, the second build which I mentioned, with Quick and Pulse, because there are going to be some range units on the front line, so 4-turn Gale Force does help. But if you want to use him with Wings of Mercy, then he could be used in the light season where Ashe is going to be there who can help you transform, and the fact that you don't really need Heavy Blade is amazing for Gale Force because it can free up that Sacred Seal to be run on some other unit, like even Ashe for example. So this allows you to basically have a 4-turn Gale Force with Quick and Pulse, and you can just jump in with Wings of Mercy, and you can also use him at max investment with a build like this. It might seem a bit confusing why we are speed stacking on a unit who already has an auto follow up. And the answer to that is pretty simple. While he can kill a lot of opponents in 2 hits, he's not going to be able to double attack the opponents who have got null follow up or have follow up negation and are faster. So speed stacking on him pretty much makes it so that he can take care of a lot of opponents who have null follow up who are going to be slower than him. And with this kind of build, by stacking up a lot of speed skills, he can pretty much reach about 65 speed unboosted, and then if you support him with the visible buffs or the debuffs on the enemy, then he can pretty much get over like effective 70 speed, which is going to be enough many times to get past a lot of fast null follow-up units. So that's the aim of running a speedy build on Tibarn. I feel like if you're going to be investing into him a lot at Plus and Merge, then investing into his speed can definitely pay off against those null follow-up units who are going to be pretty common. And let's be honest, any kind of faster unit runs null follow-up nowadays, so it can pretty much help surpass Tibarn from one of his weaknesses, which is being stopped by null follow-up units. And his speed is actually workable. It's not really too bad, and with Dragon Flowers and Merges, he can definitely reach a respectable amount, as I mentioned here. In Arena, he can be run with Ardual Flying 4, and he's definitely one of the better users of it because of his amazing flyer mobility. And again, in Arena at max investment, investing into his speed is going to be helpful because null follow-up is also really common in Arena, and also follow-up negation effects. So Selkie has got a lot more lenient condition and checks now with her weapon, which makes her into a more consistent unit, and she can basically become a big stat ball. So the first effect checks for her visible resistance, and keep in mind that this is visible resistance, so this could be boosted by Fury or by visible resistance buff or by debuffing the opponent's resistance. And if she's got one more visible resistance than the opponent, then she can get +4 to all of her stats and then get Spectrum bonus to all of her stats depending on 80% of the resistance difference. Which means that if she's got 10 extra resistance than the opponent, then she can get +8 to all of her stats additionally. She also gets +4 to all of her stats from a Refine, so if all of these effects are met and she's got more resistance than the opponent, then she ends up having +16 to all of her stats, which is definitely pretty massive. She does have the Cavalry Beast transformation, which can provide her with the mini sturdy impact in the player phase and also provides her with those debuffs on the opponent. And finally, her Refine can check for her resistance against the opponent, and if she's got 1 more resistance, then she can get Guard effect, and if she's got 5 more resistance than the opponent, then she can get the partial null follow-up. So all in all, if she's got 5 more resistance than the opponent, she can get Flow Guard in both phases. And this is pretty unique because Beast units do not have access to the Flow Refresh or Flow Guard skills, so having this built into her weapon Refine can certainly make her a lot more bulky because she's not going to be getting blown up by the units who can retaliate back with their specials, and the partial null follow-up pretty much helps her bypass a lot of the follow-up negation effects. Overall, Selkie can become a big ball of stats by having more resistance, and she also gets Flow Guard, which is really unique to a beast unit. But unfortunately, her Gen 3 stats are going to be holding her back many times, especially against the modern units who have got a lot of resistance. So winning the visible resistance check against those units is going to be a bit hard. So that's why Selkie is going to be needing the merges, the dragon flowers, and also some expensive skills so that she can be really consistent with this effect and always try to get a lot of stats and all of these effects. So if you want to build her up on a budget, then Fury is a pretty nice skill to have because it can increase her visible resistance, and because she's got partial null follow-up in her weapon, she can actually run Wind Sweep. Keep in mind that she's only going to be able to double attack through her Wind Sweep only when she's got 5 or more resistance than the opponent, because keep in mind, only then she gets the partial null follow-up. So that could be done, and then she can just run a smoke skill on a budget, and Blade Session is going to be helping her offenses. If you want to invest heavily into her, then having a cat skill is going to be a pretty nice option, and a lull skill could be run in her slot B, but she wants to have the Neotrace skill like a lot of the cavalry units, as it can enable the Kanto utility, and there are not too many other very good options available, so that's why the Neotrace skill is pretty much the best option here in the slot B. And then in slot C, she could run some kind of menace skill. She can run different menaces, it doesn't really matter too much, but defense resistance menace is available in the divine code section, and it can actually help her get better defense and also help her win the resistance check against a lot of the opponents, because the resistance debuff is pretty much going to be creating a 12-point stat differential, so that can allow her to get a lot of stats. Even though she doesn't really target the resistance of the opponent, it can still help her indirectly by increasing her resistance and reducing opponent's resistance for that check. And then she can also run a Surge Sparrow build with attack speed menace, and this could definitely be a player phase oriented build. With this kind of build, you want to run Moonbow so that you can always trigger this in a single round of combat. And if you can, then plus resistance IV is always going to be helpful with a weapon like this. If you can use your Florette on her, and attack IV and speed IV both are pretty good options. I kind of prefer the speed IV so that you can outspeed a lot of the insanely fast opponents nowadays, and you can also make productive use out of the partial null follow-up in her weapon. Now finally, if you want to use her resistance productively and actually fight against the mages with this weapon, then distance stance could be run. Her weapon is rather mixed phase. The only player phase condition that she has got is the Cavalry Beast transformation, and that's fine if you're going to be missing out on it. You can still get all of the other effects in the enemy phase as well, and you can just function as a mixed phase unit by having Neotrace skill in her slot B, because again, there are not too many options. I guess you could run a lull skill, but I do prefer to have the Kanto utility in the player phase so that you can position her nicely for the enemy phase by being within 2 spaces of the allies. That is pretty much what you need to enemy phase with Selkie, so it could definitely be done. And Mystic Boost here is going to be helping with the self-sufficiency. Defense resistance menace again helps you with the resistance check. And then finally, if you have her at plus 10, then she could be run in Arena with B-Dual Cavalry 4. And again, the menace skill is actually really helpful here against the modern units that she's going to be facing. And because of being a beast unit, she doesn't have access to Ruptured Sky. Blue Flame is a bit weird with the cavalry mobility. So in the end, she's got Aether or Gale Force, so you can run either of those specials. I just prefer to have Gale Force along with the Neotrace skill, so she could be run with this kind of build. And Selkie is definitely going to be pretty powerful with Summoner support, because at the end of the day, she wants to be a big ball of stats. So if she can get Summoner support, Dragon Flowers, merges, even get like bonus doubler from Legendary Eliwood, she will absolutely enjoy all of that and actually be a pretty scary unit with this weapon refine. Still, it does require a bit of commitment and a lot of premium skills and investment. From this batch, I feel like Spring Veronica and Ylgr are pretty much the winners because of their unique effects and how they can bring more support to the team, so I definitely like them a lot. Let me know in the comments who do you think won this weapon refine batch, and make sure to share this video with your friends if they're trying to build up any of these units. And if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to leave a like and a comment. Helps me tremendously, and if you really enjoyed, you could always support me directly by using super thanks or by becoming a YouTube member. And for more FEH videos, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because YouTube sub boxes are about as functional as Reinhardt, still waiting for his weapon refine. So with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.